Police in Merseyside are continuing their investigations into an attack on a trainee police officer, which they say was a homophobic hate crime. James Parks was set upon by a gang of up to 20 young people after leaving a bar in the gay quarter of Liverpool at the weekend. So is this an isolated but horrific incident, or is homophobia still just below the surface in our society? Here's Jackie Long.
An early evening drink in Old Compton Street. Over the years, it's become synonymous with London's gay community, a place where people can mix freely and without fear. But for the people here tonight, the news of the brutal attack on a young gay man in Liverpool on Sunday is a reminder of just how vulnerable they can be. The last 10 years has seen major changes to legislation aimed at ending discrimination and bringing about equal rights to homosexuals. But the reality for many gay people is that the abuse and often violence continues. They say changing the law has done nothing to change people's attitudes. 37-year-old Jason Columbine is a civil servant. 2 years ago, he was attacked by 3 men as he left a gay club in Nottingham. They screamed homophobic abuse at him while beating and kicking him to the ground.
I'd never been exposed to homophobia at work, with family, with friends or anything. It had been completely alien to me until that point in time. But that really has opened my eyes to the amount of homophobia. Because once you start, you're exposed to that, you start looking around and actually you start to see things and hear things. And it's certainly been a life lesson.
Jason believes much vaunted changes in the law and media portrayals of gay life are distorting the reality.
The country we live in has definitely ticked all the boxes, but it's the cultural change which I think we're battling against. But the surprising thing I find is that within our own community, certainly the younger gay guys think that we have won the fight and there is nothing else to do, whereas I've learned the hard lesson that that's not the case. It really isn't. That, OK, legislation's there, the police are behind us now, the law is there to protect us, but you still have those people who will beat you up and, if necessary, kill you purely for being a gay guy.
Paul Dooley grew up in a council estate in London. When it emerged he was gay, a local teenager went on the attack. But Paul wasn't the victim.
He was about 19 years of age. He attacked my mother over my homosexuality, and he kicked her in the stomach, and he actually verbally abused her. He said, you know, your son's a queer, and it made things very, 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 very difficult for us. I felt so angry because, you know, they did this to my family when it was nothing to do with them, because it was my issue, it was my problem. You know, I was the one that was gay.
Homophobic crime in London has risen by nearly a fifth in the past year, according to Metropolitan Police figures. But this is clearly not a problem confined to the capital. James Ledward runs a gay magazine in Brighton, the so-called gay capital of the UK. He says homophobia remains a serious problem there and across the country.
It's happening in cities all over the United Kingdom. It's not an extraordinary event. For many years, activists have been complaining that the homophobic attacks aren't being taken seriously. And more I'm concerned that's what's happening.
But even the full extent of the problem remains unknown, with figures suggesting 3 out of 4 victims of homophobic crime do not report them to the police.
Jackie Long. Well, joining me now in the studio is novelist and columnist Anne Atkins and Johann Hari, columnist for The Independent. Johann Hari, first of all, where does this problem lie? Has something significant actually changed for the worse?
Well, I think crime always goes up in recessions, but it does seem from the British Crime Survey that homophobic crime is going up a bit more than general violent crime, which is really worrying. And I think there are 2 institutions we really need to look at to understand this. The first is schooling. Almost all these attacks have been by young men who've recently come through the school system. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the only place in Britain where it's still acceptable to be violently homophobic is Britain's schools. The most detailed study of this was by the University of London. It found 43% of gay kids get beaten up and 17% get told they're going to be killed. Now, that's an astonishingly high level of violence, and these kids are then taking that out beyond the school gates because schools aren't tackling it. But the one bit of really good news is the study found that in the schools that do have a consistent policy of tackling homophobic abuse, whether religious or non-religious, and tackling homophobic bullying, the violence fell by 60%. We can and deal with this.
But the fact is that Anne Atkins in many schools is not being dealt with, is it?
I think I'd agree with Johann totally, that the worrying thing is this seems to be going up when you would expect it to be going down, when general tolerance of homosexuality in society seems to be far more than it was 10 or 20 years ago. This kind of violent, homophobic attack seems to be much worse. Now, I suspect the main problem, which has been kind of touched on in some of the reporting, is that it's not taken seriously enough. Why did it take, why can it take 12 days to inquire why a lesbian couple have been beaten up in Brighton, But I wonder too, and this is very much a question rather than a statement, but I wonder whether there are some things some difficult questions we're not asking. If you take, a parallel, like why are more people voting for the BNP, you can get terribly hot under the collar and say they're a stupid bunch of racist so-and-sos, or you can actually say, what is it, what's making you feel threatened? Why do you feel the need to, and I wonder if, as our tolerance of homosexuality has increased, so our intolerance of people who find homosexuality unacceptable has also increased. And I don't know, this is just a question, whether there's a problem there, that our liberalism can sometimes be very illiberal towards people who don't agree with us.
Yes, but of course in the Stephen Gately debate we saw that, didn't we?
Yes, indeed.
We may be liberal, but of course at the first chance.
Yes, and that's a very sort of complex thing, because somebody says something we don't like, and there is very much a sort of knee-jerk reaction. What we need is the kind of liberalism that allows people to express.
I was going to say, we're so short of time. I really want to go on to this point with Johann and you. Is there a danger, in a way, with the rise of faith schools, where there are different teachings and different views on homosexuality, that actually may be a problem, Johann?
The University of London study found that in faith schools, gay kids were 10% more likely to be bullied violently, and also 25% less likely to ever tell anyone. If you think about how isolating that must be, to never describe your sexuality to anyone. And I know the most heartbreaking letters I get from kids are kids who are at faith schools who are being told, you're going to burn in hell if you ever express your sexuality. And I know Anne believes, I know Anne wouldn't phrase it that way, but you do believe that gay people should never have sex, and it's immoral if they do. And I think those attitudes do actually lead to a very disturbing climate. I absolutely believe in your right to express them, but they lead to a disturbing climate.
That is very, very depressing if that is true, and I'm not doubting it, but if that's true, it's very depressing because it is totally at variance with true faith. Now, you've singled out, the Christian view, which I espouse, as do Orthodox Jews and Muslims and many of other faiths, is that sex is exclusively for marriage. That's not particularly an anti-gay thing.
But you don't believe gay people should be allowed to get married?
No.
So they should never have sex?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say...
You have said that in the past, though, Anne.
Well, OK, I've probably said many stupid things in the past. I've said some very stupid things about
I'm glad you admit it was stupid. I'm glad that's real progress. It's a real sign of progress that you're admitting you've made stupid and homophobic comments before.
Of course I've made stupid mistakes in the past, but... no, but... sorry, I've completely lost my track now.
What we're talking about is that you talking about schools for Orthodox Jews, talking about Muslim schools, talking about Roman Catholic schools, for example.
Right, if aggression towards homosexuals is higher in those schools, that is very, very depressing and totally contrary to those faiths.
But unfortunately, I understand that you think it's contrary to those faiths, and I understand that's sincere, because you think that you're giving the message, A, homosexual acts are immoral, B, they shouldn't happen, but C, don't be nasty to gays. But I don't think you can be surprised when people hear 1 and 2, but miss out 3.
No. A far more important message of Christianity is tolerance and love, and the sort of things.
But not tolerance of them ever having sex. They should never have sex.
That's really stupid.
No, it's not stupid. I'm sorry, if you believed that black people should never have sex, people would agree immediately that was shocking.
Look,
but saying gay people should never have sex is just as bigoted.
I'm afraid we could go on. It's not after dark. Sadly, we could go on.
Anyone who wants to can Google it.
Very much indeed. Very quickly.